8 o'clock show, y'all. We going in right now. It's your boy Stiggity in the building, doing what I do. Underworld shit, new age of hip hop and R&B. Make sure y'all like and share the show. We streaming on 10 different sites. If I'm talking and y'all can't hear me, if you in the chat room, let me know. Shouts to everybody that's tuning in, whether you're watching the recording of this show, if you're watching this live right now, that's how we do. We're playing Indie Artist Spotlight tonight. Mark of the Beast show is definitely coming soon. Make sure y'all tune into that. Make sure y'all follow us, like and share the show, all that good shit, man. We going hard tonight. I'm playing the most indie music you done heard. Throw these glasses on and really get right for it. I'm about to light something. I'm sipping something. I'm getting ready for the show, man. So, like I said, man, this is a new age of hip hop and R&B. I'm about to bang this music for y'all. Hopefully y'all enjoy the show. Let people know what's going on in the underworld, because this is what we do in the underworld, you know. And that's what it is. So trying to wait and see who's gonna come up in here. But we're gonna go ahead and get into the show, man. So let's transform this real quick. Here we go. Let's get into this music, y'all. Request lines are definitely open tonight. 856-270-8846. That's the request lines, y'all. Make sure y'all call in if you want to give a shout out. If you want to talk to me, the host, O Styles JFK, I'm in the building all night tonight. We on 10 different sites right now. So like I tell everybody out there, make sure y'all follow us on all these sites: YouTube, Periscope, Twitter, Facebook, all the sites we on, man. Hit us up on those sites. Let me see if we online. Yeah, we on right now. I'm about to start a watch party, so everybody out there, join my watch party. Share everybody on your friends list for this watch party. We're going to spark something up, sip something, and go into these indie artists, man. Shouts to all the artists on this. I'm going to be tagging y'all while we do this show. Let's get into it, man. Shouts to my Melbourne fan, too. Underworld Radio, who we got on the line?
And I'm going to say Underworld.
Underworld. Hold up. Keep the hype. It's Underworld. It's an Underworld thing coming on.
You already
gotta
know.
come up. The Underworld will win.
Let's get it. It's how we do right now, man.
Yo, I'm not an industry nigga. I'm an industry nigga. You feel me? Like, I'm that black rose that grows from that concrete. You feel me? Like, it all started in the underworld, man.
Let's go.
Styles,
Let's
man.
go.
It's Mr. Make It Happen, better known as O3 Magic. Jimmy Hoffa _103rd on Instagram. You feel me? Come fuck with your boy. Go holla at New Jersey #1 hip hop, man. Yo, especially if y'all from New Jersey. The platform is there for y'all. You know what I'm saying?
That's lines are definitely open. 856-270-8846. We live in the building, y'all. Underworld Radio. Let's go. Shouts to my homie Q-Mo, Fresh Flow ENT. Commotion is definitely the next wave. Let's get it, y'all. Let's go.
Yo, Sticky Dio Styles, what up? Underworld. LaCar BYOB. Stanhope House. Cooler Cafe, Conscious Youth, Danny Clinch and Asbury Park. Farmer Boys. First Famine. Supreme Alliance. I appreciate all y'all for putting me on.
Underworld.
Shout out to Rel. Buzz in the South Jersey Cyphers, what up? But how come I ain't never get put on the Jersey Fresh Jam or Art All Nighter, the Marsden House Cyphers and all that? How come you ain't put me on?
Yeah.
What up? I know y'all see me. I been in y'all town, man. What's good?
Let them know how
I don't get it. It's like I'm knee deep in freedom of speech, freedom of weep. It's easy to creep, count sheep in your sleep. It's, nah, man. I ain't gonna do that.
You can get them.
It's like I think they're kind of scared. It's like
they scared of you, bro. Let them know what you're supposed to do.
You need to. I don't know, man. It's like
I need you to talk to
it's like you lock your bars before they can break out. Shoot back a paparazzi and call that media takeout. So who's next to catch this tongue lashing from the city where even kitties sticky for gun stashes? Smoked up, knocked off, blown away, blunt ashes. let's see who can run fastest. Head of the street, fam, running with the best. You the end of the week, man. WTF? 3X banging in your cipher, time's overdue. If I rhyme over you, here's my rhyme overview. What commotions spew, mostly roasting and toasting you. Many y'all call commotions leading a chosen few. Kinetic energy flow with a century. Freeze MCs like mad MP3s on PCs. Even killing your memory mentally, not a word to think. Razor sharpen your pencil, punish you with the pad and pen. Then I just murder the ink. No more silence, just violence. Sirens, sad music, violence. Don't believe me, then try it. Then get your goonies or hire men. Meet the Trenton version of Murder One. Bite a pen, hobnob with goblins. Maybe it's Leviathan. Inciting the rioting. Well, come on, invite him then. I'll be ready to fight with them. So I built myself up, chewing on these one-word punchlines. Vitamin. So what this tyrant is trying to insinuate that I'm watching disintegrate right from my dinner plate. Principle of the matter is I'm here to administrate the abolition of mainstream. Time to integrate, lyrically renovate, innovating the best weapons. Commotion putting words together is a death sentence. You can't call me out from dead zones. Go to your cemetery and urinate from the headstones. I get it, headstones. Hip-hop ain't dead homes. There's a resurrection of real rap in your headphones. Kill.
Yes.
Oh man, Old Styles, bro, I think they scared, man.
They scared of you,
I know
bro.
y'all see me going city to city. I be in your city, y'all ain't even invite me to your cipher or to your show.
Real
It's all
talk.
good.
Real talk.
It's just little old Q. I mean, I'm a humble dude. I mean, I just spit from the heart. I show love, man. I don't know, man. I give credit where credit is due, man. You don't see me out with the whole fresh flow camp and all that much. I just mostly roll dolo. Y'all ain't scared, are you? I mean, it's not like I'll out rhyme you or anything. It's like would I really out rhyme you and your whole team? Well, on second thought, maybe you should be scared. Kill.
Coming to you live for Underworld Radio. It's your boy Siggity Old Styles. Live for Commotion, Fresh Flow ENT. Y'all scared, man. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Shouts to my homie Q-Mo, Fresh Flow ENT. Commotion is definitely the next wave.
Square up, square up. Square up. You bitches in my DMs, it's some square. You spreading rumors, but I don't really care. You keep on picking, I'ma beat your ass, I swear. Talking down on me, but I don't play fair. You bitches in my DMs, it's some square. You spreading rumors, but I don't really care. You keep on picking, I'ma beat your ass, I swear. Down on me, but I don't play fair. You like paparazzi, wanna take a picture of me? Let the Hannibal, you wanna wear the skin off me? Cause I'm sexy and you wish you was fly like me. He got a big dick and I got ass on me. I heard he played you and he made you feel quite crazy. But I got his ring and you ain't got nothing on me. I don't know you, but you say that you know me. You're a lurker like my grandma, you so nosy. Say little bitch, calm down. I'm like Mike Tyson in his prime first round. You think you slick, but you a clown. You got me laughing, you a joke in H-Town. You bitches in my DMs, it's some square. You spreading rumors, but I don't really care. You keep on picking, I'ma beat your ass, I swear. Talking down on me, but I don't play fair. You bitches in my DMs, it's some square. You spreading rumors, but I don't really care. You keep on picking, I'ma beat your ass, I swear. Talking down on me, but I don't play fair. Silicone injections, that's that broke bitch shit. Get that fat transfer, that's that rich bitch shit. You ain't got no edges, I can buy you drops. Call a big booty Judy, cause I heard her shit work. I don't do no dirty shoes, I don't do no short nails. I just do the money walk, like a Mayweather's girl. I just bought me a rollie, but that shit did nothing for me, so I gave it away, cause that shit does not impress me. Little bitch, calm down. I'm like Mike Tyson in his prime first round. You think you slick, but you a clown. You got me laughing, you a joke in H-Town. You spreading rumors, but I don't really care. You keep on picking, I'ma beat your ass, I swear. Talking down on me, but I don't play fair. You bitches in my DMs, it's some square. You spreading rumors, but I don't really care. You keep on picking, I'ma beat your ass, I swear. Talking down on me, but I don't play fair. Square up. I don't wanna wear no makeup, no wig, no nothing. I got something to say. Square up, square
up. Years ago, showing love to Trayvon Martin, who was definitely done an injustice in this. And we started out with the hoodies, the pulls and hoodies, and I brought out the Get Money Gangsta CDs, you know, in tribute to him. And we at volume 8. I'm gonna take it up to volume 10, maybe even further, I don't know. But this is definitely a dedication to not only Trayvon Martin, but to all of the people slain by, you know, police brutality and the injustice in the system we got. So much love to everybody that's supporting. Much love to understand.
Danger. I'll bring it back. Brace yourself. I put your head in your lap. Taste yourself. Your man running up is a waste of help. On my Jeffrey Dahmer, cut out your heart, throw it in the grinder. Cook pancakes and use it as my Aunt Jemima. The dark side of my thoughts rise when I'm caged in. I talk slicker than Ali at the weigh-in. I should end it here, but I got more in store. I won't get into detail of shipping them retail and making them greet me like the Lord of War. Trying to stack my paper, not be
got
mad
the
at
request
you,
lines open, y'all. Make sure y'all hit us on the request line. 856-270-8846.
Like Gallagher.
Call in, man. We're going in tonight, man. Shout out to everybody in the chat room. Good to see so many people stopping through. Make sure when y'all come through, you hit the like and share button. Come on, let's get this shit popping. Yo, lights on. Let's go.
I'ma give them what they need. And so it seems the spotlight's on me. So I'ma give the people what they feed. They want that fire. They want that fire. I'ma give them that fire. I'ma give them what they need. Cream on the inside, brown on the outside. Talking about my dick chick, open up your mouth wide. You don't want static, change the channel. I can arrange the vigil, just bring some candles. Hit your block like some eggs, how I made them scramble. After that, I'm taking off like Cape Canaveral. I was the force underground with the bass and treble. Now I'm the heat on the surface like a solar panel. Fuck the song, it's literal how I do a hater. Leave the body in a tree, call it human nature. Beat your ass with my belt buckle, pootie tang ya. Fumigate ya, think you the shit, I duty stain ya. Dig a hole and let a mole find you. Forget 2 guns, you see 4 arms like I clothesline you. Class is in session if the magnum is the weapon. Somebody get him some help like the classified so section. It seems the spotlight's on me, so I'ma get the streets what they need. They want that fire. They want that fire. I'ma give them that fire. I'ma give them what they need. And so it seems the spotlight's on me, so I'ma get the people what they feed. They want that fire. They want that fire. I'ma give them that fire. I'ma give them what they need. In my lane, no games. I'm trying to just win. So I'm a man up, like 9 against 10. I'm hotter than the sun, who wanna shine against him? Got a swimming pool jab, it'll dive in your chin. Y'all act real funny and I'm trying not to grin. How you run to jail but can't dial out the pen? I work shorty out like I styled in the gym, but keep a low profile, proud with the brim. It's me and my team, so grab the towel, throw it in. That's hardcore beef like a cow with some Timbs. Come to my dojo, we can bow and get it in. Crack on the streets, got the competition looking slim. Creme de la creme, yo quiero cualquiera. Let me stop. My flow is a spatula, how I control the pot. My blood pressure cracking the levee over the top, and I can drive the streets crazy, getting show for the nuts. So it seems the spotlight's on me, so I'ma get the streets what they need. They want that fire. They want that fire. I'ma give them that fire. I'ma give them what they need. And so it seems the spotlight's on me, so I'ma get the people what they feed. They want that fire. They want that fire. I'ma give them that fire. I'ma give them what they need. And so it seems the spotlight's on me, so I'ma get the streets what they need. They want that fire. They want that fire. I'ma give them that fire. I'ma give them what they need. And so it seems the spotlight's on me, so I'ma get the people what they feed. They want that fire. They want that fire. I'ma give them that fire. I'ma give them what they need. underworld.
Hey, Smash.
You a bad little bitch, bad little bitch.
I got a bad little bitch. I got a bad little bitch. Yeah.
Bad little bitch.
Hey, bad little bitch, you don't know it, but she mine. Charlie A1, swear to God, I ain't lying. And you ain't never had a real one, cop the dime. Damn, little mama, why you do this all the time? They hating on the kid, well, they running out of time. I'm creepy up, but you know I'm bullying with my slime. My other bitches hit me, baby, I ain't got the time. Working overtime, time to stay up on my grind. And shorty, she gon' make that ass clap for them dollars. Take it up, then bring it home to Papa. Girl, you slim, thick, look something like a model. We VIP waiter, yeah, I need another bottle. Everywhere we go, the bitches gon' follow. Smack $100 bill off a stripper bottle. Yeah, or the more gold bottle. I ain't never ever claimed to be a role model.
Oh, baby girl, go hard. No disrespect to the person that you are. You a bad little bitch, bad little bitch. bad little bitch. Shooting lighter than a shooting star. Bad bitch, and I noticed that you are. You a bad little bitch, bad little bitch. Bad little bitch. Oh, baby girl, go hard. No disrespect to the person that you are. You a bad little bitch, bad little bitch. Back that ass up real quick. Stupid, thick, thin by far. Make that ass clap, booty cheeks going hard. You a bad little bitch, bad little bitch. Bring that ass here real quick. Spitting, and I'm staying with my squad. She say she wanna get it, she gon' ride. Doing splits off the pole, splits off the dick. Oh baby, that's what you get. Oh baby girl, go hard. No disrespect to the person that you are. You a bad little bitch, bad little bitch. Bad little bitch. Shooting lighter than a shooting star. Bad bitch, and I noticed that you are. You a bad little bitch.
They say the money made me, but I just made the money. Drop it off at the trap house and watch how the money go to running. They say the money made me, but I just made the money. Drop it off at the trap house and watch how the money go to running. They say the money made me, but I just made the money. Drop it off at the trap house and watch how the money go to running. I made the money quick. Drop it off at the trap house. Boss man status. Dope make a young nigga cash out. Too much loud to the head. Got a young nigga about to pass out. 200 stay on the dash. That's why I drive real fast now. Shot a freeze every other week. And I'm all about to go act out. Gucci and Javinci on my feet.
Shouts to everybody in the chat room right now, man. Much love, y'all. Y'all definitely making the show go hard right now. Make sure y'all like and share the show, man. We definitely gonna keep going hard for y'all. Shout out to Sylvia, much love to you hanging out with me. Got my nephew in the building with me. Shout out to my nephew Quan G. You know what it is. Shout out to KNFL. Much love to you. My niece Jay Smalley in the building. My brother Kareem Smalley in the building. Y'all know how we do, man. It's Underworld Radio. Make sure y'all like to share the show. Quest line is definitely open. 856-270-8846. Call up for all y'all.
In my rental car, busting plays like the glass house. Niggas know how I trap out. Show the game till they tap out. Whip it up, then I smash shot. Going ham in my trap house, my trap spot. Run zips out the door non-stop. Break it down, weigh it up on the clock. Get your money, rubber band them racks up non-stop. Never close shop, get your money round the clock. This trap shit don't stop.
They say the money made me, but I just made the money. Drop it off at the trap house and watch how the money get running. They say the money made me, but I just made the money. Drop it off at the trap house and watch how the money go to running. They say the money made me, but I just made the money. Drop it off at the trap house and watch how the money go to running. They say the money made me, but I just made the money. Drop it off at the trap house and watch how the money go to running.
Looking away like this. Pull it up the hip like this. Best on your bitch like this. Little nigga, you ain't got no sauce like that. Ain't getting no chips like this. You ain't no shit like this. Young nigga get rich like this. Your diamonds don't hit like this. You ain't pull up in no whip like this. Pull it up the hip like this. Best on your bitch like this. Little nigga, you ain't got no sauce like that. Ain't getting no chips like this. You ain't no shit like this. Young nigga get rich like this. You ain't gang, gang, gang. I don't know you from nowhere. You don't get no love nowhere. Side bag and the gun go there. And all in my trap, I got a package with the higher heat. RIP who lining me. Ain't no bitch inside of me. It's all automatic. They don't want no static. Smoking like organic. Back here watching Panic. They know who the baddest. Y'all ain't get no cabbage. Y'all ain't get no salad. If I count it, add it. I don't see no balance. I don't see no challenge. You ain't pull up in no whip like this. Pull it up the hip like this. Best on your bitch like this. Little nigga, you ain't got no sauce like that. Ain't getting no chips like this. You ain't no shit like this. Young nigga get rich like this. Your diamonds don't hit like this. You ain't pull up in no whip like this. Pull it up the hip like this. Best on your bitch like this. Little nigga, you ain't got no sauce like that. Ain't getting no chips like this. You ain't no shit like this. Young nigga get rich like this. Yo, shorty all on her knees, but she ain't got what I need. I want a couple of G's, I want a couple of freaks. I hit it up, then I breeze. I run a check up and leave. I make like 20 a week. I smoke executive weed. Boy, them was looking for tips, they'll never get it from me. Brand new foreign, I don't know if I want Beamer or the Benz. Niggas scheming in my ends, double teaming with the feds. When last you seen a trap nigga Mino with the pen? 40 leaving, leaning left. Been for beaming on his head. Your diamonds don't hit like this. You ain't pull up in no whip like this. Pull it up the hip like this. Best on your bitch like this. Little nigga, you ain't got no sauce like that. Ain't getting no chips like this. You ain't no shit like this. Young nigga get rich like this. Your diamonds don't hit like this. You ain't pull up in no whip like this. Pull it up the hip like this. Best on your bitch like this. Little nigga, you ain't got no sauce like that. Ain't getting no chips like this. You ain't no shit like this. Young nigga get rich like this.
To all my people in the struggle, To all my people dead and gone, To all my people in the hood, Yeah, feel me on this. When the clouds peel away and reveal what's above, will my Father have mercy and embrace me with his love? With the sins of a thug and the story of a soldier, it made me when I am, I wouldn't do a thing over. See, I know the tribulation, the turbulence, the shaking on this flight called life. Hold on and be patient. At times I think I'm breaking so weak, like the end is near, but that's a new beginning. When I see I never had no fear, tears on my sleeves dried up, it's a drought now. Third strike now, my man ain't never coming out now.
That's how we doing right now, man. We're going heavy. Underworld shit. In the building. Smoking something, sipping something. Getting right. You know what I'm saying? So everybody that's tuning in. I see a lot of people came in and hang out in the chat room with us right now. That's dope. So make sure y'all like to share the show. Hold us down. Coming back. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, you know how Facebook do. They like to ban things. So if they do shut us down at any point in the show, tune in to us at YouTube. Subscribe to us on YouTube. You go catch us on Periscope, OK, Streaming, Twitch. You know, we're on a lot of sites right now, so I'm trying to chill in each chat room, hold down this chat room, but I'm in this chat room first and foremost. See, my shit is jumping right now. Shout out to everybody. I got my man in the building. What's up, Craig? What's good with you, bro? Like I said, I see a lot of people popping in. When you pop in, make sure y'all share the show. We're going to be going to like, what, 10 o'clock tonight, probably a little later. Like to share the show, man. That's how we do underworld shit, man. Let's keep it going now.
Race spilling blood in the streets as a preacher. I congregate with these, testifying through your speaker. See, I know death a little more than the next. Lost my man, now I'm trying to fight a beat inside my chest. Stress when I see his son, how can I explain it? And when I see God, will he say my soul is tainted? See, I move by faith and not by sight. Spread my wings and I fly to whole new heights. I can't change my past and change my life. Where I'm from, you're here today and going by night. See, I move by faith and not by sight. Spread my wings and I fly to whole new heights. I can't change my past and changed my life. Well, I'm from your head today and going by night. You see, I can barely sleep up at night, just planning. Wake up early morning, always keep a loaded cannon in the land so forsaken, always battling with Satan. Tomorrow isn't promised, see, I'm really not for waiting. Taking what I know is mine, everything will come in time. Blood on my uniform, I'm out here on the front line. I dedicate this moment to the lost and the forgotten, in the youth in the streets, just surviving, living rotten, catching early felonies, caught up in a cycle. Time flies, remember we was listening to Michael. Life is like a thriller, judge the man in the mirror, see the light getting closer, now the picture's getting clearer. Tone, man, I hear you when you whisper in the midnight. Earth's angel in black, I spread my wings and take flight, drifting on your memory, shining down from up above. You'll be in my heart till my death, so just spreading love. Yeah, move by faith and not by sight, spread my wings and I fly to whole new heights. I can't change my past or change my life. Where I'm from, you're here today and going by night. See, I move by faith and not by sight, spread my wings and I fly to whole new heights. I can't change my past or change my life. Where I'm from, you're here today and
back. All these niggas keep on talking they ass, running here and I'm letting it blast. Wait, I was just born in the trap, cutting dope, just right in the bag. All these niggas keep on talking they ass, running here and I'm letting it blast. Wait, basically going with the pack, started birth when I know how to flick. Ken bro, yeah I grew the brick, double up with the flick of the wrist. Took a block just to pistol the shit, all day wasn't taking no shifts. Trap phone, yeah I'm making a click, clap hard till a nigga get rich. Ball mains, these ain't Levi's, these designer jeans, yeah a nigga got drip. Big gun like T size, it's a long pole, won't fit on the hip. See it hop and I'm letting it rip. Ghost mode after I do a hit, smoking dope and it's making me sick. I'ma try and get as high as I can. I was just born in the trap, cutting dope, just right in the bag. All these niggas keep on talking they ass, running here and I'm letting it blast. Wait, I was just born in the trap, cutting dope, just right in the bag. All these niggas keep on talking they ass, running here and I'm letting it blast. Wait,
I really was born on the block. Asked mama, think she lost me at 12. I was on my way to junior high, never made it there cause I got quarter with sales. Big brother had to side with it and I was seeing shit that he caught in the mail. Mama used to tell me, nigga, fuck it, you could do what you want, but you walk in the jail. 16, I had a thing with the V's. Used to park all 3 in a piece. Used to have young knees in the trees. Whistle niggas soon as you see the D's. All I wanted was a coupe thing. Every day sight new trends. You would never see the eyes glow cause a couple hundred on a new lane.
I was just born in the trap, cutting dope, just right in the bag. All these niggas keep on talking they ass, running here and I'm letting it blast. Wait, I was just born in the trap, cutting dope, just right in the bag. All these niggas keep on talking they ass, running here and I'm letting it blast. Wait,
I used to trap at the trap, never seen you and your man as a rat. Wait, we really post across tracks, style boy and he's still on the map. Wait, if I call guns it's a rap, head tap, ain't no bringing them back. Trap talk, got a dish off the pack, running here and I'm letting it blast. Act up and we letting all straps, dope strong, smell the shit through the bag. A lot of money, I'm just touching the cash, beams on a no laser tag. Wait, yeah I'm just chasing the bag, every show I'm showing my ass. Style boy and I get to it fast, style boy and I get to it fast. Wait,
I was just born in the trap, cutting dope, just right in the bag. All these niggas keep on talking they ass, running here and I'm letting it blast. Wait, I was just born in the trap, cutting dope, just right in the bag. All these niggas keep on talking they ass, running here and I'm letting it blast. Wait,
you know I love her like she loves me. Underworld. If you don't know what it's hitting for, I'm finna show you right now. Pull up. I told niggas about trying me, nigga. Huh? Tell a nigga to pull up. So somebody tell a nigga pull up. Please. Tell a nigga to pull up. You're not a friend to me. Real niggas know who's down and who the enemy. Tell a nigga pull up. And you'll remember me trying to put on the front for what you pretend to be. Pull up. So if you send for me, you better know what they doing and have the same energy. Tell a nigga pull up. So if you send for me, you better know what they doing and have the same energy. I'm switching, I'm swerving, I'm driving in the fast lane. Kid, the way I'm coming off, I'm showing off. I'm not the same kid, but you know me. Still slide where your grams live, not with the small talk. I reload and then I blame shit. Know nothing of what you claim. My niggas don't only bang, my niggas that twist their fingers cause they a part of the game. But the fam, KKK, shit won't be the same. Most styles turn shit to mayhem. It's prices that bring you pain. Case smash is TNT. If I blow, I take out 4 blocks. And if you want war, let me know I'm at your doorknob. And if I don't get you, them goons that come and get you. Got butchers that's nice with blades, sharpshooters that's sharp with pistols, Jamaicans that hold machetes. They use that to come and get you. Take your shit like a man. If you running, that's an issue. I'm thinking to put you under the world. Nigga, I'm digging to put you under the world, and that's official. Tell a nigga, pull up. You're not a friend to me. Real niggas know who down and who the enemy. Tell a nigga, pull up. And you'll remember me trying to put on the front for what you pretend to be. Tell a nigga, pull up. So if you send for me, you better know what they doing and have the same energy. Tell a nigga, pull up. So if you send for me, they better know what they doing and have the same energy. Tell a nigga, pull up.
You was my girl, but I ain't got time for a bitch. I cannot wind it down with a bitch. I won't waste my time with a bitch. Gotta go and get mine. I'm on my grind and this bitch won't stop. Can't block my shine. I'ma get money all on my mind and shit. Gotta put a dime on my wrist. These niggas don't know me. I don't hard to rock. I ain't Kobe. Half a mil split it all with my brodies. We empty the safe, then reloaded. They holding my spot. I was down, I climbed straight to the top. Niggas tried and they played, they got shot. Better duck when you hear that. Some new shit. When we fuck, get it wet like a pulpit. She gon' fuck for Chanel or that Gucci. She bout action, she ready for movies. If she fucking a Zoe, it's a Zuvi. Just a bitch, my sweater is Coogee. If you lost me right now, who you losing? I want love on these hoes, we can choose them. Hear my voice, all these bitches go crazy. I get two of these niggas be lazy. I turn pro, all these niggas to training. I started my own campaign. All black bottles, we sipping champagne. Celebrate after we break the bank. Pull her up, that bitch give me brain. When we fuck, she be grabbing my chain. God damn. Back off, little bitch, back off. I'm on my grind, I can't slack off. I run it back, no need backup. All I know is how to get them racks up. She like, why we can't never build? I got no time to fucking chill, baby. I'm really chasing these fucking bills. Just want me bring home another my girl, but I ain't got time for a bitch. I cannot wind it down with a bitch. I won't waste my time with a bitch. Gotta go and get mine. I'm on my grind and this bitch won't stop. Can't block my shine. I'ma get money all on my mind and shit. Gotta put a dime on my wrist. These niggas don't know me. I don't hard to rock, I ain't Kobe. Half a mil split it all with my brodies. We empty the safe, then reloaded. They holding my spot. I was down, I climbed straight to the top. Niggas tried and they played, they got shot. Better duck when you hear that. Leaky know him. Nah, juice, a nigga don't know him. Load them sticks and get ready to blow. Say less, my nigga, I'm blowing. Hit up check till that nigga is smoke. 10-4, I know checky on go. We gon' bend the block, yeah, I know they a foe. Fuck, nigga, we gon' triple the scope.
If they hit my phone, you know I'm on go. All my niggas on your block now. Bending your bitch, yeah, now you get tricky. Drop the top, let the shots out. Niggas be talking like they be outside, but when we slide, never pop out. Little them cage, you ready to ride. When you see me, ain't no cop out.
Back off, little bitch, back off. I'm on my grind, I can't slack off. I run it back, don't need backup. All I know is how to get them racks up. She like, why we can't never build? I got no time to fucking chill, baby. I'm really chasing these fucking bills. Just want me bring home another. You was my girl, but I ain't got time for a bitch. I cannot wind it down with a bitch. I won't waste my time with a bitch. Gotta go and get mine. I'm on my grind and this bitch won't stop. Can't block my shine. I'ma get money all on my mind and shit. Gotta put a dime on my wrist. These niggas don't know me. I don't hard to rock, I ain't Kobe. Half a mil split it all with my brodies. We empty the safe, then reloaded. They holding my spot. I was down, I climbed straight to the top. Niggas tried and they played, they got shot. Better duck when you hear that.
Can't stand them, yeah, cause I ran out like Jack. BB diamonds and blue honey. That nigga like new money. Run up, try to taste on like black young, so my shakes on. The bags just landed, yeah, and it came out of candy, yeah. The plug can't stand them, yeah, cause I ran out like Jack. BB diamonds and blue honey. That nigga like new money. Run up, try to taste on like black young, so my shakes on. Been moving that pack, I've been counting my blessings. 13, I couldn't study my lesson. Hard head with a money fetish. Stuck in that bed like a retarded kid. Better watch the fade cause I ball for real. Scottie Pippen back in 93. Ain't no another nigga hot as me. These niggas envy cause they tryna be. Shot with me, got what you need for the cheap. The trap booming, got the key to the street. Your bitch love me cause I'm good in the sheet. Leave it down the beach, shining around beat. Pat just landed so we pulling down the ski. Thought we gon' bob, but we riding for the peaks. Call me Jackie the way I left the sea. again. Bad fit with good gas and beat. Supply the streets and that's on me. Don't play me stupid cause I keep the heat. No back and forth and you can keep the beat. Money talking, you niggas weak. No throw it like cause I ain't Tupac. I'm a humble nigga but I keep the Glock. Perfect ain't like a sniper shot. Perfect ain't like a sniper shot. Swear they gon' hate me when I pull in the rain. Diamond shining like the sun in your face. Class clown but I'm up 40K. All gas and we don't need no break. MT we gon' make some shit. MT we gon' make some shit. The patches landed, yeah, and they came out like Cali, yeah. The floor can't stand me, yeah, cause I went out like Jackie, yeah. BB and diamonds and blue honey, giant nigga like new money. Run up, try to taste on like black young, so much chase on. The patches landed, yeah, and they came out like Cali, yeah. The floor can't stand me, yeah, cause I ran out like Jackie, yeah. BB and diamonds and blue honey, that nigga like new money. Run up, try to taste on like black young, so much chase on.
Hold on, wait. Ron G is in the building. These racks up in my pocket, man, they damn near touch the ceiling. Big bitch up in her feelings, cause I got no time for chillin'. Been focused on the money, baby, trying to reach a million. In the streets, I am a villain. I pay niggas for killings. He ran off on the plug, he tried me and I'm a killer. Young niggas run around K'd up out here looking for a reason just to spray something. Better hold your tongue and shut your mouth for the 762, come say something. 448 with a way, bro, but I know 112 was shaker. Either make you right or lose your life, cause I never in my life been fake, boy. All I know is get cake, boy. Yeah, stay low key, move weight, boy. Keep your friends close, but your enemy closer, cause these fuck ass niggas be fake, boy.
The patches landed, yeah, and they came out like Cali, yeah. The floor can't stand me, yeah, cause I ran out like Jackie, yeah. BB and diamonds and blue honey, that nigga like new money. Run up, try to taste on like black young, so much chase on. The patches landed, yeah, and they came out like Cali, yeah. The floor can't stand me, yeah, cause I ran out like Jackie, yeah. BB and diamonds and blue honey, that nigga like new money. Run up, try to taste on like Underworld.
Niggas never gave me shit, I scream fuck 'em. Try to play a low-key nigga but never duck 'em. Talk behind your back to your face, they say you're nothing. Here's your application, bitch niggas check off frontin'. Plus when you down, them fools they never round. But a wise man once said even the circus got clowns. So I'ma do what I do.
Throwing it up right now, y'all.
With the E to the nest, staying fresh to my death.
Y'all let me know in the chat room if y'all can hear me well.
Hey, when a nigga
we doing it up. The way to hip hop, R&B. Like I said, right now we're looking for some R&B artists. We need y'all to link up with us if y'all got R&B music y'all trying to put out, promote. We in here, y'all. Questline's open, 856-270-8846. Let's get it, though. South Fresh Flow ENT, man.
Once you apply and you approve, you can chill it out. I grab a Pyrex pot and whip a skillet out. You was holding info, I make you spill it out. So many hoes caught the vapors on Judgment Day. And niggas try and count the money, I got tucked away. If I pop another bottle, I need double let. So I can give a rat's ass with a sucker set. You guilty by association, you should fill it out. Niggas shoot so many bricks, they could build a house. They should bury all informers, let the killers out. Legal with blind to write rhymes, you can fill it out. I'm with the Fresh Flow gang on 54th Street. I met him at the Cav game, it was floor seats. The west side of Washington up the northeast. We turning all you cornballs into corned beef.
You need a hitter's application.
You should fill it out.
And custom fees and registration.
You should fill it out.
And when you want the real plays in the field, what's the deal? Got an expert in the bill.
You should fill it out.
You need some numbers for your show.
You should fill it out.
Your funds are coming kinda slow.
You should fill it out.
And for the thirsty heads, who gon' turn their heads? You wanna know what the survey says?
You should fill it out.
Sneaker King on deck, move to being made connected with Ines. Car go down the highway. Exit 78, phone posit King, hologram how I play. Mr. Bacon on deck, doing it my way. Fresh with the flow, Gil Buster all day. Black entrepreneurs got the haters saute. Red carpet SK, that's how they walk me. Trenton in the building, Nev Day off me. Hustle hard, black bottle boys, epic movie. Black models at the W, bubble jacuzzi. Shining on these ducks, soft as a smoothie. Money get a sense, Bill Cosby wearing the Gucci. Whack niggas make me unruly. Nah, we ain't cool, you fake pops ain't raised no fool. I've been on my grind, destined to receive what's mine. Violate if you cross that line, Christopher Reeve your spine. Smoking on that fine, straight island vine. Test me, you must be out of your mind. Make it hard for you day and nighttime. Nighttime.
You out of fresh hot Loch Ness?
Bring the dealers out.
Promo for the go-go to the ho-go.
You can feel it out.
You can't deny we the realest out when we chillin' out.
You need a permit for the flow.
You should fill it out.
I've been a student of the game, learned some lessons there. Wanna know my thoughts, dude? I've been filled out the questionnaire. Worked at MTV, BET.
How you getting there?
Putty tat haters get testy.
Couldn't get a pair.
Top floor of Hollywood stores, yeah, some mess in there. Fresh flow and that's know this game, it ain't never fair. Rappers running out of they life savings to come inside. Gotta act,
Fill it out right.
we are the ones denied. Sneak this or being wagon, now you wanna ride. Money wise, all funny guys, yoked up sunny side. Your funds are dry, you always asking for help with it. Can't check the man in the mirror using a selfie stick. I never doubt what you really bout in the interview. When in the drought, how you deal reveals the inner you. 360 deal is out, went the indie route, so fresh flow for hiring out.
You should fill it out.
You need a hater's application.
You should fill it out.
And cuffing season registration.
You should fill it out.
And when you want the real plays in the field, what's the deal? Got an expert in the bill.
You should fill it out.
You need some numbers for your show.
You should fill it out.
Your friends are coming kinda slow.
You should fill it out.
And for the thirsty heads, who gon' turn their heads? You wanna know what the survey says?
Fill it out. Fill it out.
Fuck your past, baby girl, I'ma give you the future. Mother niggas ain't know what to do, well, I'ma show them how to do, yeah. So you know what's real. You know what's real. Fuck your past, baby girl, I'ma give you the future. The mother niggas ain't know what to do, well, I'ma show them how to do, yeah. So you know what's real. You know what's real. Fuck your past, baby girl, I'ma give you the future. Mother niggas ain't know what to do, well, I'ma show them how to do, yeah. Foreplay, my tongue, it go crazy. We talk, no laziness between. Say she want me fast and I'ma give it to her. Beat that ass down, bend it into ya. But you know it's real. When we make love, you know what's the deal. Fuck your past, baby girl, I'ma give you the future. Mother niggas ain't know what to do, well, I'ma show them how to do, yeah. So you know what's real. You know what's real. Fuck your past, baby girl, I'ma give you the future. Mother niggas ain't know what to do, well, I'ma show them how to do, yeah. So you know what's real. You know what's real.
It's your boy Neathy Cab, back in action.
You know how he I already knew.
It's
Like,
underworld, and I'm here repping it, and I ain't got no words to say, but it's what to do. It's underworld, underworld, new style.
Harley Quinn, pleased to meet you. I'm the queen, I'm the shooter, bitch, I'm mean. Voices in my head, Harley Quinn. Shoot me, I ain't dead, Harley Quinn. The baddest in the city, Harley Quinn. Take the whole trap, Harley Quinn. Wrench a nigga out, Harley Quinn. Bitch, I'm fucking Harley Quinn. Look, bitch, you can't touch me, you're not on my level. Tell your nigga drinks, mouth, feet, something clever. Diva D the baddest, bitch, you ain't heard. Back in high school, I was a jock, you was a nerd. Keep the lights low when I'm cruising ho. Every time they see me, they like, damn, here we go. Okay, my city on, bitch, I don't play. Told you I was getting money, stacking top. Hey, I get the money and go. Probably so official, certified psycho. Yes, I'm the queen, all you hoes kiss my ring. Bustin' down walls, so beware of my team. Bitches be talking, but ain't with the shit. I pull the fuck up and empty the clip. For the whole pack, time to re-up, bitch. Long days in the trap, that worth it was a trip. Look, something like a movie, something to watch. Bitches be watching and them bitches trying. Bitches can't touch me cause bitches behind. All of my bitches, we ride and we fine. Trying to come for my brother, bitch, they gon' find. Your ass tied up, turned upside down. They gon' blame Illuminati, cause bitch, they won't find evidence linking diva deep to the crime.
You can't touch me, I'm the queen, I'm the shooter, bitch, I'm mean. Voices in my head, Harley Quinn. Shoot me, I ain't dead, Harley Quinn. The baddest in the city, Harley Quinn. Take the whole trap, Harley Quinn. Wrench a nigga out, Harley Quinn. Bitch, I'm fucking Harley Quinn.
Look, that's on the chase while we chasing this paper. They wasting my time, then they wasting my paper. They mugging the club, got no time for the haters. Keep my shades on, I'm with Joker, they hate us. I fuck in the city up with this greatness, got the whole Gotham shaking with the 808 bass. And in my suicide squad, got them shook, hell raising. Ain't no Justice League coming, niggas got your heart racing. Look, couldn't get the money and go. Bitches tryna murk me, dead shot, head ho. El Diablo, flames burning, I'm the head honcho. Coming real soon, best believe you should know. If it's my team, we gon' fuck up your dream. Put a bag on your head so they can't hear you screaming. I can't help but laugh at the sound of your screams while I'm sipping espresso and robbing this train.
You can't touch me, I'm the queen, I'm the shooter, bitch, I'm mean. Voices in my head,
Harley Quinn.
Shoot me, I ain't dead,
Harley Quinn.
The baddest in the city,
Harley Quinn.
Went and turned a few bars into a gold mine. Now these whack rappers giving me the evil eye. They done opened up the door and let a beast inside. I'm putting jobs on the line, they can't sleep at night. Real reason why these rappers taking acting classes. Law falling off, really, I just can't imagine. Been on beats like I'm talking to a therapist. Get pissed, hit the studio and drop a hit. Be lit, lost, stay with the candle flow. Words leave my lips and travel all across the globe. They rocking off their phone, me I'm rocking off the dome. Spit my verse like I'm on stage at a show. One take, yeah, smell the loop, we taking over. Can't recall the last time I had to lay it over. Drop 16s, 32s, and 48s. All my life rap substitute me selling weight. And my album date a national holiday. It's like Thanksgiving Day waiting on a plate. Food for thought, man, my music like soul food. Watch me flash across the screen like breaking news. Spit the ugly truth, now my gang sitting pretty. Move my family to the burbs from the inner city. Kinda witty how your boy put it all together. Ross and Legend magnificent, we rich forever. Cemetery pockets filled with dead presidents. Fans see me in the streets, they hopping out their skin. When I'm in a really good situation. Free to roam where I want, but the crib gated. I'm rated #1 cause I'm out here #2. Scratch performing at the club, get paid to walk through it. Finally doing everything I ever dreamed of. About to start ghostwriting.
Got a problem with paranoia. Keep a problem in the foyer. Speed dial on my lawyer. Senile, I never saw you. Meanwhile, I gotta keep it vertical. Hating niggas, Sean and Irvin, you a pat on the back. Now they burping you, begging hand. When I arrive in the terminal, half now, other half wheels down. M in the W, how that feel now? I don't know, I ain't got it yet. Had a habit like an army vet. A lot of gas like Denali get. I'm in these streets like a trolley wreck. No flash on me, I'm low key. Got a passport from 01. Spending cash since last week. That stunting shit ain't no fun. Now I'm on my purpose. Now I'm at my furthest. Now they getting nervous. Gotta pay for my service. Hey, glitter, glitter, glitter. It ain't all glitter. You see diamonds in the picture. I see a whole gang of hitters. But I see glitter, glitter, glitter. It ain't all glitter. You see diamonds in the picture. I see a whole gang of hitters. I've been told you it's game on. Red beam, but you ain't wrong. Sound like it's the same song. That fake shit, watch Akon. No shade with shades on. At your door like Avon. Handful of my day ones. On top of beef like A1. Yeah, I know what the struggle like. Getting heat from the oven like. Same grub from the other night. Sleeping coats for the covers right. Glitter, 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 nigga. You don't know the half, nigga. Living on the Ave, nigga. Police on my ass, nigga. Now they going back to my old shit. Trying to get a rap from my old bitch. Is he a felon or he sold shit? Do we got a house on both wrists? Making a change like Sophist. Cup of Belby now rollers. Securing the bag like Otis. Feeling the weight on my shoulders.
Y'all spend a lot of time
trying to shine but can't rap. Frontin' like the game is great and you know it ain't that. Tuck your shit in slow motion. Tuck your shit in slow motion. You wanna have frontin' holding that bag and they gotta hate a nigga hungry to carry.
Glitter, 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 glitter. It ain't all glitter, glitter. You see diamonds in the picture. Yeah. I see a whole gang of hitters, but I see glitter, 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 glitter. It ain't all glitter, glitter. You see diamonds in the picture. Yeah. I see a whole gang of hitters. Hey, hey, glitter, 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 glitter. It ain't all glitter, glitter. You see diamonds in the picture. Yeah. I see a whole gang of hitters, but I see glitter, 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 glitter. It ain't all glitter, glitter. You see diamonds in the picture. Yeah. I see a whole gang of hitters. Hey, hey.
It's all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. But we don't listen to the. Yeah, hey yo, 99% of these rappers be telling fizz, trying to find crap that they packing to sell to kids. They never tell them to be head of a chapter, they tell them to be a rapper, like they all live happily ever after. Although it's nice how some of us getting iced out, kind of a slave riding a wave getting wiped out. The love of the money's the root of all evil, polluting their people so addictive and using is legal. They say they do it real big, unbelievable. You say you do it real big, we don't believable. INDEPENDENT, and they don't know what that means. That's why when these weak G's pretending we envy, but see I'm over that scheme. A real MC, it's like a punch your face, trying to sound all deep. Oh, sunken place, and you're full of. It's all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. But we don't listen to the.
Talking all that tough shit, come and get me, pal. But y'all got no nerve like a root canal. I'm loyal to a fault line, so when I shake these to the bones, best believe it's assault time. They talking about me, they clocking the watch. The kicks cost 3, I drop 2 on the socks. I watch your iPhones get hot in our zones. I don't go live, I turn up in time zones. Either she love me or she love me not. I've been known to smoke it out like a hookah shot. They say the finer things in life often come with higher price. Well, the way they treat a bro might as well have gave me life. And the way I run the track might as well have gave me nights. And my shit's so fly, you might as well give me likes. Knock off the bull. You know I go hard. I go on the beats, couldn't fit in my draw.
It's all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. They all full of.
Yeah. First it wasn't. Then you call me a colored man. Then it was Negro, now it's Afro-American. I don't need your names, cause I got my own. I'm the original man who's been lost from home. Now for untold years, no one showed they cared. That all my black people had to live in fear. But now stop, because your tricks don't appear to me. I'm a wiser man now, because I studied my history. Born on the top, I'm still living on a hump. Don't consume white sugar, but you can get these lumps. The lame BS James, fake card playing trumps. I got a poker for a joker if you wanna play Trump. Damn, Cali devils calling me a racist zealous, cause I'm conscious of the truth without fear. And I'm telling, at least ain't dirty priests running around or killing. Got the when I see it, even without smelling it.
It's all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. We don't listen to the. They all full of. They all full of.
Idiot is attempting to reach you on your cellular device.
Coast to coast instrumental.
I've tried to keep it humble. I'm tried.
bundles. I'll try to keep it humble. I'll try to move these bundles. Y'all get trying to step on your toes. That's not how this shit goes. You get blown with the fucking fofos. You niggas better read the book, better look it up. You make a lot more if you cook it up. Keep a loyal fiend that'll hook it up. You niggas need the blueprint, then y'all should look at us. Not in disgust like we on the back of the bus. I'm trying to keep it humble. I'm trying to move these bundles. I'll try to keep it humble. I'm trying to move these bundles. I'm trying to keep my sanity. But these young boys like to keep playing with me. I ain't the game, I'm in the game, I run the game. My name ring bells. It's old styles, all my niggas yell. And we in the place, y'all. It's underworld all in your face, y'all. It's the pitch, catch the baseball, cause I'm home and I'm safe, y'all. Pussies, we the dickheads, come to break balls. I'm trying to keep it humble. I'm trying to move these bundles. I'll try to keep it humble. I'm trying to move these bundles.
Ripping the ones and twos with the hottest.
I can make a wise lady from a crybaby, or change Slim Jim to Slim Shady, or maybe I could hold the world in the palm of my own hand. A land of the no man, be dipping in the river. I can make a snowman shiver. I'm so chill, get any freeze ice with my skill. Making glass shatter, I can use my mind over matter. I can make the fattest man get even fatter. I can make the sun turn blue, and everything Roy could do up in the ring, I could do it to you, and it is true. I can make a whole G from a Q. I can even give that DJ clue and make your dreams come true. I can see through the shadows of the night and make a ton feel like it's light as a kite. Word life, I can make the limelight bright enough for the blind to get sight beyond sight. I could change a village in a tinsel town. I could take a sumo wrestler pound for pound, the world renowned. Sound of my flows get down. I can make it rain all year round. I can do all things. I can do all things that the whole world brings. And with the king on my side day and night, I got to swallow my pride and let God's light shine very bright in my life. I tell you which crew has got my back. I can do all things as my spirit's intact. I got the Lord of hosts on my side day and night. Don't you hear it? The angels, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. To the break of dawn, and the line I be rhyming on. I can transform the day into a quiet storm, and I can start a fire with a fountain on the lawn, or win a game of chess with just a king and a pawn. Even if I'm locked in chains, it can arrange for this whole thing to change from death row to lover's lane. Yo, don't you know I could flow from here to there? I could turn a bum off the street to a mayor. So you asking for civil action and satisfaction? I could resurrect and put the black back of Michael Jackson. I could do all the impossible, like take songs from Marilyn Manson and make them sing gospel. If there's any barrier, I can break through it. I could do anything if I put my mind to it. You can do anything if you put your mind to it, and we can do anything if we put our minds to it. I can do all things. I can do all things that the whole world brings. And with the king on my side day and night, I got to swallow my pride and let God's light shine very bright in my life. I tell you which crew has got my back. I can do all things as my spirit's intact. I got the Lord of hosts on my side day and night. Don't you hear it? The angels, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
WR Priority Artist.
Where's my 40? My 40 acres and my mule. See, I'm trying to keep my cool. They done played us for a fool. Where's my 40? After all you put us through, and the evil is you do, we just trying to live like you. So where's my 40? My 40. But where's my 40? My 40. But where's my 40? My 40 acres and my mule. See, they play me for a fool, so I'm about to lose my cool. Where's my 40? I
I want all the issue promised me. See, 40 acres is land, I want my property. We can build together, don't gotta be a monopoly. I just wanna live my life without you stopping me. Only got one life to live, I gotta make it. So if you ain't got it to give, I gotta take it. My rent and these bills is real, I can't fake it. And the IRS be on my ass, and I can't shake it. Yeah, I guess you thought it was cool, cause some graduated from school and got a house with a pool, a watch, bracelet, and necklace that's all covered in jewels. But only the ignorant niggas was fooled. I ain't trying to stunt, I'm trying to move from the back to the front and be equal so all my people can be what they want. Don't take this next statement as a threat or a front, but to be blunt, we better get what we want, motherfucker. So where's my 40? My 40 acres in my mule. See, I'm trying to keep my cool, but they done played us for a fool. So where's my 40? After all you put us through and the evil is you do, we just trying to live like you. So where's my 40? My 40. Where's my 40? Where's my 40? My 40. Where's my 40? Where's my 40? My 40 acres in my mule. See, they play me for a fool, so I'm about to lose my cool. Where's my 40? Cause I know you don't think repaying us was giving us our so-called freedom like you were saving us. The slave masters became cops and they're still slaying us. All because we're misunderstood and they're afraid of us. So you betrayed our trust talking about you saving me. Protect and serve? Nah, it's more like modern day slavery. You send us to the cage of the grave and it ain't savory. America, home of the brave, showing their bravery. Yeah, so we really ain't get a thing. And please don't say you gave us the support to the music game. Cause along with that came the dope, pills and cocaine, and the most addicted drug of them all, better known as fame. So, to make a long story short, your debts ain't repaid, cause you gave us a ball in the court. New whips and chains, some dames, and a few new drugs to snort. Cause in the end, you still coming up short. Motherfuckers, I want my 40. My 40 acres in my mule. See, I'm trying to keep my cool, but they done played us for a fool. So where's my 40? After all you put us through and the evil is you do, we just trying to live like you. So where's my 40? My 40. Where's my 40? Where's my 40? My 40, where's my 40, where's my 40? My 40 acres in my mule, see they play me for a fool, so I'm about to lose my cool. So where's my 40? Yo, where's my 40? Who got my 40? Where's my 40? Who took my 40? Where's my for real, you got my 40? Hey yo, Phil, you see my 40? Where's my 40? Give me another OD, man.
We in the building, y'all. Underworld Radio in the building, live with your boy Stiggity. Shout out to Miss Kaylani Bells, my homie Raylo Williams. Much love to y'all. We gonna have the Underworld Radio definitely in the building, y'all. Let's get it.
This is that hip hop that you asked for. That shit you banging in your ear make you cut 'em off. This is that hip hop that you asked for. That shit you banging in your ear will make you cut 'em off. Hip hop shit, I spit all pit, God's gift. When it comes to your chest, you should guard it. All shots shoot to the sky, that's how you start your hit. Smash, flow, cocaine, and I'm spitting raw shit. Cut a nigga off shit. Now, I'm a big nigga, so no time for small shit. And your soldiers wasn't moving right, that's how your boss got hit. White flag, forfeit, and they knew I had the plug, I was willing to spark it. And I hope you can cash all these checks you forging. The fake thug with kids turn their kids into orphans. This is that hip hop that you asked for. That shit you bang in your ear will make you cut 'em off. This is that hip hop that you asked for. That shit you banging in your ear will make you cut 'em off. This is that hip hop that you asked for. That shit you banging in your ear, nigga.
Never sell my soul. I got my respect. I got birth control. You used to make my music for the strippers on the pole. You go ahead and hate them about to dig another hole. Everybody walking around with their chest on swole. Until I get you slipping sliding like an Eskimo. Pour me up a drink, I'm about to swing an episode. It's from with these Judases, but boy, you never know. Martin Little Mexico, they about to plug me up. Blue filter, Walking Dead, and why they dug me up. Smoking one, why I'm rolling one, that's double dutch. Looking for a big old bubble butt. Double cup, double cup. Yeah, I said it tastes like bubble gum. Burger said it'll hit your ass, it's like a sucker punch. Won't try to lie in front like you don't want you something. Popo knocking on my door like, what the fuck? It just me, myself, and I. Don't need nobody else. Coming down on 9, find me in my double cup. I don't ever leave home without my double cup. You looking for a double up and coming fuck with us. I got my double cup. 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 I got smoking super duper. Don't pass me no hookah. I got this here Ruger. Yeah, I bought it for intruders. I just came back from the future. Oh shit, now I'm Looper. Fuck you in your Uber. I'm the driver and the shooter. Pull up in an SUV or on the motor scooter. Unclogging the pipeline, call me Rotor Rooter. Sipping on Kahlua. Hate to do it to you. Treat you like a shish kebab and throw you on the skewer. Coming down on my high like a parachuter. Sarataro, Farrow, Gama out in Chattanooga. Fill me to the brim again in Boston, Massachusetts. Percocets and Pua, all way down to Aruba. Drink myself into a stupor. Sure they ass is stupid. I'm in love with double cup like I got shot by Cupid. Double up your situation ain't really shit to it. Double cup for everybody singing, oh let's do it. Bitch, just me, myself, and I. Don't need nobody else. Coming down on 9, find me in my double cup. I don't never leave home without my double cup. You looking for a double up and come and fuck with us. I got my double cup. 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 I got
my homeboy, my South Crack family, DJ Tony Pot. Now tell him that.
K-Dub, 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 K-Dub.
DJ Cool J.
Yeah, they jellies cause they know I'm on the ride. Yeah, they jellies cause they know they don't shine. I live my life a quarter mile at a time. For them devils, I got money on my mind. Yeah, they jellies cause they know I'm on the ride. Yeah, they jellies cause they know they don't shine. I live my life a quarter mile at a time. For them devils, I got money on my mind. I got money on my mind, so they can't stop the hustle. Got a lot of mouths to feed, it come with a lot of muscle. Niggas hate on me cause they can't really fit the skull. Niggas hate on me cause they still burdened with the muddy. If you down, baby, to get you a bag, ain't no nigga ain't gon' eat your scratches. Yeah, it ain't gon' eat your scratches. But I woke up and I got it. Come to take the city, call me dog. Stack the bag, then we skirt off. Come to ball, that's a courtesy call. Making moves out of state. Nigga mad cause I elevated. Gotta keep food on my plate. I'm tryna put a meal in the safe. Rolling woods every day. We living life in a major way. Mama, we did it, we straight. Mama, we did it, we straight. Look at all this money I'm dripping. Look at these diamonds I'm freezing. Call me frozen, I'm incredible. I guess I give you has a reason. I wanted it all, that's a mission. I deserve it all, no more penny pinching. Yeah, no more penny pinching. Yeah, they jellies cause they know I'm on the ride. Yeah, they jellies cause they know they don't shine. I live my life a quarter mile at a time. For them devils, I got money on my mind. Yeah, they jellies cause they know I'm on the ride. Yeah, they jellies cause they know they don't shine. I live my life a quarter mile at a time. For them devils, I got money on my mind.
Thinking about that moolah, I'm talking stuck in my medulla. Police plotting, tell them catch me. I smoke big gas when I'm ready. Came a long way from that Reggie. Pull up in that Chevy, screech the tires, foot be heavy. Let some shots off at the car. In the club, that nigga stress me. Don't know why that nigga test me. Class and session, here's your lesson. Smith and Weston for protection. Use a chopper for suppression. Killers all up in my section. In the club, that nigga stress me. Don't know why that nigga test me. Class and session, here's a lesson. Smith and Weston for protection. Use a chopper for suppression. Killers all up in my section. You survived and that's a blessing, nigga. You survived and that's a blessing, nigga.
Yeah, they jealous cause they know I'm on the ride. Yeah, they jealous cause they know it almost shine. I live my life a quarter mile at a time.
Yeah. The fuck y'all niggas dog? Flex. I been flex. I been by bust down. That shit ain't nothing. I be flexing.
I be flexing. I be with it. I be stunting all summer, all through the bidding. I be flexing, I be with it. I be shining all summer, all through the bidding. I be flexing, I be with it. I be ballin' all summer, all through the bidding. I be flexing, I be with it. I be stunting all summer, all through the bidding. Popping bottles, pocket guapi, yeah, I'm stunting with it. Bentley parked out front and I'm flossing in it. 10 chains round my neck, cost a cool milli. I be dumb out on these suckers, got them looking silly. 35 pointer settings in my rolling bezel. Never traded in my Breitling cause it looked better. 10 rings and 10 chains, yeah, I had to kill them. Travel doing numbers all summer for the Skrilla. All he know is flexing, I be stunting on him. All summer, all year, I be shining on them. Flex, flex, I be grinding on them. Flex, flex, big timing on them. I be flexing, I be with it. I be stunting all summer, all through the bidding. I be flexing, I be with it. I be shining all summer, all through the bidding. I be flexing, I be with it. I be ballin' all summer, all through the bidding. I be flexing, I be with it. I be stunting all summer, all through the bidding. Why they hating on the nigga? Cause I got a bag. Ay, real street nigga, I ain't never had a flag. I got my shooter in the back, ain't no time to count. Ay, we be ready to spin your block like we running loud. Ay, just pulled up in that Bentley. Ay, got these niggas looking mad, looking silly. Ay, I don't think they never seen a $250,000. We be in and out of traffic trying to get it. Ay, 10 racks in the back, we ain't seen no cash. Fuck nigga, they be hating cause we getting cash. Ay, ay, pulled up in that Bentley. Ay, 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 pulled up in that Bentley. I be flexing, I be with it. I be stunting all summer, all through the bidding. I be flexing, I be with it. I be shining all summer, all through the bidding. I be flexing, I be with it. I be ballin' all summer, all through the bidding. I be flexing, I be with it. I be stunting all summer, all through the bidding.
Sometimes you just gotta sit back, watch and listen, get a full understanding of things, you know? You didn't want me seeing brighter days, and only wanted me to lose my way. And all them jealous thoughts that you displayed, listen, I seen it coming from a mile away. Plotted on me, trapped me in your maze, but it was nothing for me to find my way. I was prepared for this since 20 days, nigga. I seen it coming from a mile away. Brightest day, I done read your mind, your thoughts. I saw the signs, this grimy motherfucker could've waited to catch a nigga blind. All of your intentions was to knock my hustle. Pull the pistol on me, leave the scene with all my bundles. I seen it coming so thick.
I seen it coming from a mile away. I seen it coming from a mile away.
I seen it coming from a mile away.
I seen it coming from a mile away.
soul, in my guts. Folk ain't in your life, they don't care how they hurt you. Say you a dream, get it going to murk you. Dog eat dog, real guessing ain't personal. Shit goes so left, ain't irreversible. Hold up, motherfuckers never wanted me to blow up. Saw it coming, they was prepping me for bad news. I was ready, preparating, played it so smooth. You had no clue, holla back cool, then I'm back cool. Looking brand new, fresh on them. Somebody heard, somebody mad, huh? Thought I didn't know I was close to a downfall. Thought I wasn't taking it home with a ground ball. How long will this go on? Faking, prolong, acting like you got love for me, acting, trying to get close to me, acting like you don't know.
I seen it coming from a mile away. I seen it coming from a mile away. I seen it coming from a mile away. Oh, I seen it coming from a mile away. I seen it coming from a mile away. Seen it coming from a mile away. Are you ready? Are you ready, baby? Are you ready? You should be ready for anything. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you? Are you? Are you? Are you ready? Are you ready, baby? Are you ready? You should be ready for anything. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you
acting like you got love for me, acting, trying to get close to me, acting like you don't know it's me. Start that up for my eyes. I know your type from a mile away. Get one off for me not today.
Whack rappers on the TV and radio. Some going platinum, some going gold. I don't know who they know, but it's suspect. I make hits, man, why I need a mixtape? Kinda great when you keep putting fire out. I'm the only person that can put my fire out. We fire it up, somebody call the firehouse. When I rap, man, people say quiet down. Law come to town, they shut down the airport. The way we move make them wonder why we there for. Pharaoh goblins on my face cost 2 bands. Hop in sedans not made on this land. Nah, them the foreign joints. I got a plan all mapped out ready for me. I produce a whole gang of dudes to do their numbers. Every summer we chillin' with the pretty women. Got my brother on live showing how we living. Life in every day already automatic. We in the fly whips, double park with the hazards. It get graphic when I speak about my real life. Freestyle like a mixtape on site. Whack rappers on the TV and radio. Some going platinum, some going gold. I don't know who they know, but it's suspect. I make hits, man, why I need a mixtape? We deserve non-stop on the radio. I spit a verse and they say I really brought it home. I'm in the club on the phone with the club owner. He say he paid me a little extra if I stay longer. Sick capacity of law still showing up. I'm sipping off 2 bottles, 1 cup. Didn't know I could make all this in one night. We stepping out the club when it's light outside. Smell the look, early morning ventures. Customized van rolling like grandma. Lifestyle get publicized by B-Star. FBI taking pictures like the paparazzi. Bronx plug, but we need a fountain Spanish Harlem. Causing carnage in the hood like a mad villain. But that's the roundabout me there, say your boy chillin'. Spilling liquor on kicks that cost a couple $100. On YouTube stunting, but a brother won it. Whack rappers on the TV and radio. Some going platinum, some going gold. I don't know who they know, but it's suspect. I make hits, man, why I need a mixtape?
Pulling pieces out the sky, pull a scene from out my mind. Pulling pieces out the sky, pull a scene from out my mind. I'm just living that life, though. I can keep ballin', chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. I lock and load in my revival. I can keep ballin', chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. Just living that life, though. I can keep ballin', chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. I lock and load in my revival. I can keep ballin', chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. I start pulling pieces out the sky, pull a scene from out my mind. Get crazy, Scorsese, John Singleton, and Hughes brothers for my line. Roll a Spike Lee joint, about to make a movie, show you how the world truly a pile of poverty. Mold the pottery, a melting pot to be destroyed in confusion. Action, shoot
red dot for recording, now that dot for the target block. Target block, hit him up, numerous shots with the 4-4 is going down. Down on how the homies trained us, down on luck, down on paper, down state, down on haters, living the way that they say grandma mind never raised us. We just living that life though. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. I lock and load in my revival. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. Just living that life though. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. I lock and load in my revival. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. Out tears in the jungle, see you alive as soon as your pride making an absence. In a rock in a hard place where my family raised me. I grew with the gap is, I grew with the back is. Your lifestyle bringing the package, personality in your fabric. Matter over mind, never mind if you got mind enough to maintain a ration. Made a madness, the lifestyle made me grab it. Perspire your pain and passion, aspiring, I'm past it. I am the dream you napping. That's cause they made my checks up and away get at it. Bottom to the top, nigga, basement addict. All I wanna do is rock, nigga, basement addicts. All they wanna do is stop. What? My pace to have it, from silver to plastic on scroll. Soon as my habitat mode, from suburb to city, the pity, the poverty. I just adapted to show that the stars in the moon till I'm all in that. Dollar for the Lord, he ain't calling back. All I wanna do is write what's wrong with that. So I'm marching on with our target on the Mark Smithy song. Just living that life though. Living that life though. Can turn you upon or string you along. The chain of the psycho. Hope you think of what I know. Taking a stride though. And pray with your Bible. This world is taking a dive. We taking a ride to make it alive. And say that it's fine. Cause we just living that life though. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. I lock and load in my revival. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. Just living that life though. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better know it. I lock and load in my revival. Lock and key, ballin' chain, psycho. Better know it, nigga, better.
They say, welcome home, nigga.
They just let me out that bitch.
Yeah.
What we on tonight?
Do say.
Russ, what's happening?
What up, Ty, Big J? Ha. Hey. Yeah. Do say. When I'm on that do say. I'ma eat up till that you say.
Run to the bank like you say.
Oh, do say. When I'm on that do say. I'ma eat up till that you say.
Run to the bank like you say.
Oh,
do say. Running with the bag like you say. Round the stick like Hussein. Phone whip, pull up the blue flame. I came from rad to riches. I fuck the baddie bitches. I keep a baddie with me. Say where we live and living. I put that hand down, I pick up that douche, I'm geeking, that hard in the beamer. I pop me a burger, I put that dick on her, she trying to put me in deeper. She all in the feelings, I'm all with the bag. Valentino on my sneakers. I'm draped up and dripped up, I order that douce on Twitch, then Herc and Katrina lit.
Oh, do say. When I'm on that do say. I'ma eat up till that you say.
Run to the bank like you say.
Oh, do say. When I'm on that do say. I'ma eat up till that you say.
Run to the bank like you say.
Oh, do say. Black Lambo looking like Bruce Wayne. Can't hang with the crew, nigga, Fugazi. Put his face on the T cause he two-faced. I don't hang in the streets all damn day. I'm a grown man, now they came a long way. But my little man stabbing in the hallways. Lights out in the broad day. Yeah, one of the greatest to flow. Niggas was hating and they just came home. Nigga was talking, I'm making the call. Spit out the stick like it's Razor Ramon. I'm crazy, Chico. Damn, I am cool. Y'all niggas love it. Diamonds is cutting just like Peter Warwick. My bitch in Florida, trapping her bundle, so I split your wig and she cover it up in a love. Do say. When I'm on that do say. I'ma eat up till that you say.
Run to the bank like you say.
Oh, do say. When I'm on that do say. I'ma eat up till that you say.
Run to the bank like you say.
Oh, do say. When I'm on that do say. I'ma eat up till that you say.
Run to the bank like you say.
Oh, do say. When I'm on that do say. I'ma eat up till that you say.
Run to the bank like you say.
Legend, the guy. No 5, 10 to 20, say just keep keep it 100. Got a whole lot of niggas, they move when I say something. Oh yeah, yeah. What you need? Oh yeah, yeah. Fuck with me? Oh yeah, yeah. Got broccoli? Oh yeah, yeah. The money trees? No 5, 10s or 20s, say just keep it 100. Got a whole lot of niggas, they move when I say something. Yeah, yeah. What you need? Oh yeah, yeah. Come fuck with me? Oh yeah, yeah. Got broccoli? Oh yeah, yeah. The money trees? Oh yeah, yeah. First off, I'm up in first class. If you're looking for me, bitches ain't give me the time of day, and now they looking for me. Remember, I was short with no money. They was looking funny. Now I pop bitches like bottles. We not no role models. All I know is full throttle. Hit a girl or spin the bottle. Bad for your health if you follow. I've been riding, just riding around. I'm Magneto with the steel. Wolverine, sit down. If you cross the line again, then you out of bounds. Got a pistol with a silencer. I'm taking you out. Getting murked, RIP, t-shirt. You looking like you need work. Your bitch say that I'm a jerk. 2 fingers up the skirt. That's the way that we flirt. Niggas say that they crazy. Well, nigga, I'm berserk. Only time I go to church is to put a bitch to work. Spit, fine collection plate. Horizontal, set them straight. Ain't no 5, 10s or 20s. Say just keep it 100. Got a whole lot of niggas. They move when I say something. Yeah, yeah. What you need? Oh yeah, yeah. Come fuck with me. Oh yeah, yeah. Got broccoli. Oh yeah, yeah. The money tree. Ain't no 5, 10s or 20s, say just keep it 100. Got a whole lot of niggas, they move when I say something. Yeah, yeah. What you need? Oh yeah, yeah. Come fuck with me. Oh yeah, yeah. Got broccoli. Oh yeah, yeah. The money trees.
My bitch don't wear no makeup, nigga, fix your face. When I was wearing Jacob, y'all was getting chased. Before they cut the check, I had the nickel plate. You run up on me, get your gap, and you get a race. I ain't Tiger, but China, she get a taste. Let me push your dick up in your figure eight. Now I don't take no short, you better get it straight. You type to get the BMW, I get the brief. You a disgrace, I let this 40 shake. And I bet not see you ratting on first 48. Me and my subordinates, we coordinate. Roll a quarter pound of piece, then we pour 8. Everybody turn their back when I call a case. Y'all keep pocket watching, I got more to make. Keep the hating to yourself, dog, it's sorta late. Me and religion back to back, spinning cake.
Ain't no 5, 10s or 20s, say just keep it 100. Got a whole lot of niggas, they move when I say something. Yeah, yeah. What you need? Oh yeah, yeah. Come fuck with me. Oh yeah, yeah. Got broccoli. Oh yeah, yeah. The money trees. Ain't no 5, 10s or 20s, say just keep it 100. Got a whole lot of niggas, they move when I say something. Yeah, yeah. What you need? Oh yeah, yeah. Come fuck with me. Oh yeah, yeah. Got broccoli. Oh yeah, yeah. The money trees. Ain't no 5, 10s or 20s, say just keep it 100.
Danger. I'll take the mask off for this one. It all started like what you wanna be when you grow up. That put a target on me. I should've kept my mouth shut. To know your dreams and aspirations, get them a 1-up. To meet you at the crossroads, they playing this out from the jump. Stock market, your social, that red ink is your banking number. To cash out is to be put behind doors and taking lumber. Working for them or thrown in prison where we mistake each other as inferior. Why they hope and pray that we shank each other. The border's on our back, all we gotta do is stand up. Economic slavery put us in debt with our hands cuffed. Though I still became what I raised my hand for. It's trauma on my mental and the fight gon' be lifelong. Look into my mind,
I'm traumatized.
Look into my home,
I'm traumatized.
Look at how I move,
I'm traumatized.
Look at how I act around you.
I'm traumatized.
Coming up, I always looked at family as superheroes. The blood that we shed is what helped us recoup from zero. My mother said when I pass on, stay close with your brothers. Keep it love, no sibling rivalry, trying to hurt each other. But soon out of sight, out of mind, had took its toll. I turned a blind eye to certain addictions. When it's cold, it cuts straight to the bone. In the process, you lose your soul, leaving invisible tears on a face that's growing old. To me, life as I knew it came to a standstill. I feel like a clean shirt that got thrown in the landfill. Though I still became what I raised my hand for. It's trauma on my mental and the fight gon' be lifelong. Look into my mind.
I'm traumatized.
Look into my home.
I'm traumatized.
Look at how I move.
I'm traumatized.
Look at how I act around you.
I'm traumatized.
Never drug me when I'm in the club, G. Though I know the thug be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy? Or be at the bar with too much bubbly? Don't never drug me when I'm in the club, G. Though I know the thug be wanting to.
Hold on. Let me talk to the people real quick. It's your boy Stickity O Styles. We live in the building, Underworld Radio. For all the people on the many sites we on a lot of different sites. We promoting on a lot of different sites right now. Shout out to my Periscope people. I got my girl Kaylani. I know I always say your name wrong, sweetie. Kiani Fells holding me down in the chat room over there. Much love to her. She always do, follow me on these sites and help me promote, bring artists to, get on this joint. So shouts to y'all. Then we on YouTube right now. Shouts to my people that's on YouTube. Danger's in the building. URF is definitely in the building. Shouts and salutes to all of y'all. I'm trying to go back and forth with these chats and keep in tune with all the people that's on here. So shouts to everybody that's helping me promote. We just got banned from one site. I don't know why they banned it, but we still going. That's why we on 10 sites right now. So we gonna keep this music going. Everybody make sure whatever sites you on, you follow me on that site. Follow me on the sites that you on, and make sure you subscribe if you're on YouTube. Whatever it is you on, man, make sure you follow me, subscribe, and share that shit, yo. Let's get back into this music though. It's Underworld.
When I'm in the club, G, though I know the thug be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy? Or be at the bar with too much bubbly? Don't never drug me when I'm in the club, G, though I know the thug be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy? Or be at the bar with too much bubbly?
I play the club scene, burning down gasoline. Couple liquor, taking shots of full magazine. Money ain't a thing, I got a lot of that. Pour your queen a drink, now she wanna chat. Hopping in my lap, trying to shoot a shot. Claim she wanna get low and turn it up a notch. Got me touching on the box like a pap smear. Haters looking at me mad, practically in tears. Lord, we in here, no doubt about it. I'm in my own world, but the club crowded. Feet kicked up, flirting with the barmaid. She took my secret tip and told me that her bills paid. Send the DJ a list of my favorite songs. Heat gas, got him sipping Dom Perignon. Keep calm, smell the loot on the premises. On point, off safety for my nemesis.
Don't never drug me when I'm in the club, G, though I know the thug be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy? Or be at the bar with too much bubbly? Don't never drug me when I'm in the club, G, though I know the thug be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy? Or be at the bar with too much bubbly?
Yo, my shooter move like Sean back in 01. Ain't nobody stopping us, we having fun. By the bar, that's regular, we need it, law. Slick Rick, Mr. T, yo, my neck's off. Get my flex on, bodybuilding competition. From the Southboard, I put the brick in Brick City. Dark shades on, living in the spotlight. They on their day jobs, talking about my nightlife. We not the same type, one night your main squeeze. Pimp like Pimp C, but living like a bum B. Club scene, a crime scene, if anything pop off. Soldiers at attention, ready like roll call. Last call for alcohol, law gets served first. I got your favorite stripper, glad that she came to work. All this thirst got me handing out Gatorade. Crystal for the chase, I call it lemonade.
Don't never drug me when I'm in the club, G, though I know the thug be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy. Or be at the bar with too much bubbly. Don't never drug me when I'm in the club, G. Though I know the thug be wanting to slug me. Could it be I'm moving smooth as Bugsy? Or be at the bar with too much bubbly?
Look at you and look at me. Look at me and look at you. Niggas in the back trying to still catch up to the level that I took it to. Say a lot for the niggas in the back. One time we can do it like electric boogaloo. We can do it for the niggas in the trap with the pack, real rap, cause you know how a nigga do. Look at you and look at me. Look at me and look at you. Niggas in the back trying to still catch up to the level that I took it to. Say a lot for the niggas in the back. One time we can do it like electric boogaloo. We can do it for the niggas in the trap with the pack, real rap, cause you know how a nigga do. Time and time again, I'ma give 195%. Whenever I decide to vent, getting sucked off right behind the tent. I got a car that a couple shot %. Rubber extendo, then pop it in. You niggas faking, I will not pretend. Rubber ballpoint pen, the document. Now, okay, where do I begin? Wait a minute, your oxygen. Man, I never got the ring like Opposite. If a bitch act up, I pop a front. Loot game, everything is top end. Tryna stack more chips to IBM. If you see Hawk smash, it's probably him. Bitch got the Chun-Li with the bop pin. If it ain't Lou Phil's, not the trend. Man, it's way too much intoxicant. Never tried cocaine, it's a boxing. Throw 100 like the George Washington. White Jim when you came and try your chin. I'ma fuck around and catch you 5 to 10. With the cowboy boots and slide it in. If it take one look, it's common sense. It's common sense. Look at you and look at me. Look at you and look at me. Look at me and look at you. Look at me and look at you. Niggas in the back tryna still catch up to the level that I took it to. Say a lot for the niggas in the back. One time we can do it like electric boogaloo. We can do it for the niggas in the trap with the pack, real rap, cause you know how a nigga do. Look at you and look at me. Look at me and look at you. Niggas in the back tryna still catch up to the level that I took it to. Say a lot for the niggas in the back. One time we can do it like electric boogaloo. We can do it for the niggas in the trap with the pack, real rap, cause you know how a nigga do. I feel the vibe till my driver bust you. Roll up and I take a puff or two. Ball man, if you mad, to bust a move. And you wonder why the hoes don't fuck with you. Never wait for a prostitute to choose. Got a game plan that you won't refuse. They be like, goddamn, what Neston did. I be like, goddamn, what don't I do? They gon' do it why? Cause I told them to. A phone pop and the bill is overdue. You can take it from a kid that broke the rules. I tell these young boys chill, go to school. I got my wrists on chill like frozen food. Got a real bad bitch to hold the pool. Let my Jew boy customize the cars. He gon' take an antique from old to new. From old to new. Look at you and look at me. Look at you and look at me. Look at me and look at you. Look at me and look at you. Niggas in the back tryna still catch up to the level that I took it to. Say a lot for the niggas in the back. One time we can do it like electric boogaloo. We can do it for the niggas in the trap with the pack, real rap, cause you know how a nigga do. Look at you and look at me. Look at me and look at you. Niggas in the back tryna still catch up to the level that I took it to. Say a lot for the niggas in the back. One time we can do it like electric boogaloo. We can do it for the niggas in the trap with the pack, real rap, cause you know how a nigga.
Hold on. We still live in the building, y'all. Listen up. This is what I'm saying, man. They be trying to hold us down online. They be on some bullshit online. We was just on a whole nother site and we was live. We was getting it. You feel me? These motherfuckers want to shut us down. Now I'm playing all underground music. I'm not playing no industry shit. These is all my peoples. This is all people that gave me permission to do this radio show. You feel me? But they don't know that we broadcasting live on 10 sites right now. Shout out to my Periscope people, my YouTube people, my OK people, my Twitter people, Instagram. Like all the sites that we promote on is just because of the fact I know I'm about to go real heavy on some politics and shit. Every site where people is tuning in right now, make sure y'all like the show on that site. Like it, follow it, subscribe, whatever it may be. We got people on different sites chilling with us right now, listening to the show. I got people in Russia right now chilling and watching this show. You feel what I'm saying? And I'm loving it. Shout out to Kayana Fells holding me down in my chat room on Periscope. Because I can't really chat too much, you know what I'm saying, back with people unless I talk to you. You feel me? Like I said, y'all got to let me know if I sound good. You know, if I'm coming through your speakers sounding good, whether you're on YouTube or Periscope. Like I said, right now, we're not on the book. They shut us down on the book. We was live. And like I said, a lot of the sites don't approve of the shit that I'm doing, and I know the shit I'm about to be doing. Niggas ain't gonna approve of that shit either. You know what I'm saying? Because the Mark of the Beast show is coming, and we're gonna keep that going. Like we're gonna make that a big thing. You feel me? So watch out for the Mark of the Beast show. Anybody got any questions for me, definitely leave them in the chat room. Or you can still call in because my request lines are still open, y'all. 856-270-8846. My chat line, my chat rooms is open on each site. And we, you know what I'm saying, we about to get into it. Right now, we just playing music and feeling the vibe. Like I said, whatever sites you seeing me on right now, if you're watching a replay of this or you with us live right now, make sure y'all follow the show. That's what I'm talking about. My homie on YouTube just now said that shows you doing something right, and that's real talk. I say that all the time. It give me the drive to keep doing this shit because I know every site don't ban me, and that's the thing. The main sites be the main sites that everybody use, and they try to ban. Especially when I talk politics, they ban me, and I be telling people like, no, they don't. Yeah. When I start talking politics, they ban me. So that's why I set this whole thing up where no matter what, I'm on these sites. You feel me? I could be live to 10 sites walking down the block right now. That's how I got it set up. So yeah, I'm about to use this tool to do some things. Y'all gotta watch my movements and watch how we do it. Make sure y'all participate. I gotta show much love to all the people that already participate. We got some people that ride with us no matter what we doing, and I salute y'all. Like I said, my girl Kiana Feld, she look, I just linked up with her not too long ago, and she been holding me down. You feel me? As well as Miss Sylvia, she be holding me down. URF all day. I got URF back. Like I said, I need y'all to send me some more music so I can really get y'all heavy in rotation. You know what I'm saying? Shouts to Ron Morris and the whole URF. Shout out to my Fresh Flow ENT fan, Q-Mo. Me and him working on his album right now. He's about to drop, which is the Hood Superhero Volume 2, John. That's about to go heavy on him. Kadesh, the artist, he about to drop his double album, which is energy and vibrations. You know what I'm saying? He's doing a double joint, so that's gonna be nice. I don't know if my man Danger's dropping an album right now. You dropping the album, Danger? Got him in the chat room over here on YouTube. Shout outs to the people that's on Periscope though, man. Miss Summer, shouts to you. Shout outs to Kid Who, Claudia. Shout outs to all of y'all, man. Like I said, we making a movement. I'm starting off slow. I just now started this up, what I'm doing for streaming on all these sites. So I'm trying to build my fan base on all the sites. I actually deleted a lot of my sites just so I could start off new. And like I said, so far it's going heavy on them, man. So I don't want to talk too much. Every now and then you'll see me pop back up. I'm getting toasty up in here. I'm chilling and I'm listening to music. So shout outs to everybody that's in here with me now. Let's keep it going, man. Underworld. Let's get it.
Coast to coast.
I'm on a cloud with you, higher than I ever been, and yeah, I know. Baby got the pills for me, and I want more. I don't know no chill with you, I go with you. I'm on a cloud with you, higher than I ever been, and yeah, I know. Baby got the pills for me, and I want more. I don't know no chill with you, I go with you, I go, yeah. Martina, call her my Aquafina. I wish I didn't need her. Now baby like my ether, hot cold like last year. Baby, pull up. Where the fuck was you at last year? With you, I go, yeah. Now you chasing. I was waiting. Wasn't fucking with me, then go. You so faking. Now I'm like beep. Who got the keys to the Jeep? All I ever wanted was your time, girl. Counting down the moments till you're mine, girl. Now I'm like beep. That's all rolling out in the Jeep. I'm on a cloud with you, higher than I ever been, and yeah, I know. Baby got the pills for me, and I want more. I don't know no chill with you, I go with you. I'm on a cloud with you, higher than I ever been, and yeah, I know. Baby got the pills for me, and I want more. I don't know no chill with you, I go with you, I go, yeah. With you, I go.
Leave it, believe it, baby, so Benita. I wasn't stressed about it, now she got me like fever. I'm lost in a matrix, give me pills. She Neo in the matrix, the way that shorty kills. Now I'm raping, no more racing, looking at you in the rear view. Then my heart is breaking, now I'm like beep, 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 beep. Who got the keys to the Jeep? Girl, you got me caught up and I'm sick for you. One thing will make me better is that love from you. Now I'm like beep, 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 beep. Me and baby rolling in the Jeep, yeah. I'm on a cloud with you, higher than I ever been, and yeah, I know. Baby got the pills for me and I want more. I don't know no chill with you, I go with you. I'm on a cloud with you, higher than I ever been, and yeah, I know. Baby got the pills for me and I want more. I don't know no chill with you, I go with you, I go.
My heart may never work. He was my one true lover. My friend. I may never love. Can't imagine my life without him. I need him, I love him. I've been hurt for so long. Because of him. Sacrificed my whole life until I'm ahead. What's my behavior? And you appear like magic. Was also tragic until I felt my magic. I can't imagine life without my magic. Shit was tragic until I felt my magic.
I was searching for love, but love is unconditional. She felt some type of way when I mentioned chill, but she was wrong. She be drawn. Now she calling my phone saying I'm missing you. Searching for love, now I found you. And you do the things that I like to do. We go out to eat, go to the movies, go to the telly, drinking wine all up in the jacuzzi. Being with her, we ain't do none of that. All she wanted was sex and all my doom stacks. Being with you, you make me feel alive. You push me hard to be that perfect guy. Being with her, relationship was dead. And every damn day, unhappiness. Being with you, you hold me down. I was searching for love. Now love is what I found.
What's my behavior? Then you appear like magic. Was also tragic until I felt my magic. I can't imagine life without my magic. Shit was tragic until I felt my magic. I felt my love that most girls dream of. It's everything and more that I get for. He's more than my man. Listen to you to understand. He's my best friend, my magic. I'm so in love with my man, love keeps me high. With this touch, I believe I can fly. This love will never die. I will forever ride. Yeah. The reason why
I whisper something in your ear and tell you something sweet that you wanna hear. Or would you mind if I laid you down and kiss on you and do all the freaky things you want me to? Could you believe I can feel all your fantasies? So close your eyes and take my hand, come to me. Girl, there's no question I can give you everything you need, mentally, emotionally, and sexually. It's gonna be you, and me. know that I will always stay true. No need to look no further, I'm in front of you. How would you like it if I spent it all on you? Shopping sprees and diamond rings, it's all brand new. And don't you worry about your shorties, cause I got them too. Yes, I will be the kind of father that they never knew. It's gonna be you, you. It's gonna be you, you. It's gonna be you, 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 and me. Under the covers, girl, we grinding slowly, doing all the things that you want me to do to you. It's gonna be you, 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 and me. Under the covers, girl, we grinding slowly, doing all the things that you want me to do to you. It's gonna be you, 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 and me. Under the covers, girl, we grinding slowly, doing all the things that you want me to do to you. It's gonna be you, 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 and me. Under the covers, girl, we grinding slowly, doing all the things that you want me to do to you.
IDGAF when they play this song, sing along, kush along, make your missus ask what kind of string you on. Fucking final, all these niggas, they just throwing name on strong. Just that dizzy dope, that fizzy flow, like who you gaming on? I done been around like equator, shit got deep like voice on Darth Vader. Tryna make a wish as the stars wore everything I wanted since Sega. Saga started, I got retarded on every ball and shot classic coasters. But my young boy had the white back against the wall like them taxi posters. Now I just recorded on a program, in a mix like a slow jam. Got a nigga bopping like a toe jam. Hope she feel up on that when we slow dance. Think I'm Romeo, she tryna roll, man. See your hand ain't what I'm tryna hold, man. This ain't halftime, I don't show bands, you know, man. I don't give a fuck. When it comes down to the bullshit they airing, we don't want no more. When it comes down to it, we the ones they can't pay, can't lie, cause they know. We lie, we lie, we lit, we so gone and they can't take no more. IDGAF, that's the stage left, that's when they play the song. When it comes down to the bullshit they airing, we don't want no more. When it comes down to it, we the ones they can't pay, can't lie, cause they know. We lie, we lie, we lit, we so gone and they can't take no more. IDGAF, that's the stage left, that's when they play the song.
I'm live in the kitchen, whipping the work, pitching to eat. Wrist automatic, I rock on the sleep. It's fooded below in these streets, cold on the cooler. Ice your medulla, Ricky the ruler, I'm slick. Brain in the whip, quizzing your bitch, you go dummy on dick. Retarded as shit, tsunami, I'm lit. Wavy, I'm wavy, jock on the drip. Glock on me kick, 808 boom in your thinker. Empty the clip, speed through your city. Lego the click, snap and connecting the dots. Atomically bombing the spot, hotter than lava. Higher dimension, a boy in your privilege. Nice with the vision, the ride and the spit in the seat. Astrology over your head, I'm doper than opium meds, reviving the dead. Heard you was sick, here take a fix of the boy. I'm banging the tent, say hello to my friend. Act like you wanna get shanked with a pen. Look at them choke, I ain't giving a fuck. I'm trying to get paid in love with the guap. Give me a rollie and Mike is short.
When it comes down to the bullshit they airing, we don't want no more. When it comes down to it, we the ones they can't pay, can't lie, cause they know. We lie, we lie, we lit, we so gone and they can't take no more. IDGAF, that's the stage left, that's when they play the song. When it comes down to the bullshit they airing, we don't want no more. When it comes down to it, we the ones they can't pay, can't lie, cause they know. We lie, we lie, we lit, we so gone and they can't take no more. IDGAF, that's the stage left, that's when they play the song.
Underworld Radio, you live, you got on the air. What's up, ma? How you been?
Yogi looking ass nigga.
You crazy, man. You wild.
I get caught all kind of shit with my goddamn ass. Bad boy style. I do. That's what
I know you do, yo.
What you do though?
You know what I do. Stop playing, got my head tripping out every time, yeah. Oh, you trip. Much love to Pocahontas for chilling with us. Let's go.
Coast to Coast Mixtapes.com.
Look, Lord bless me, shit, I think I need some holy water. Niggas ain't hit me in a while. Damn, he going harder. I dipped you in my world now. Show me consideration. She takes me to my phone like, boy, your dick amazing. Fuck these niggas, let them die. That's what you get for hating. Shoe box full of money, boy, I get the cake. My bitch ass big from the back, she look Jamaican. Smoking get stone, boy, I'm something like a Mason. I hear you talking, but can't see you, nigga. Stevie Wonder, bring the thunder. Your bitch call my phone, bring a number. Hold of a lion, I ain't lying, I'm just stating facts. I'm from a city where there's snakes and some niggas rats. Got it out the mud, I ain't had pot to piss in. Me, myself, and I, we don't want your proposition. Went to jail 30 minutes, my bitch bound me out. For a nigga with the cannon, I'm wildin' out. Young niggas, you are not alone, I feel your pain. I remember I was broke, jacking everything. I'm from a block where it was hot, it don't never rain. Now these niggas turn pussy, man, ain't that a shame? Feel my pain, but you can't, cause we are not the same. You's a bitch, you're drunk driving, stay up in your lane. I'm the shit, I'm done rhyming, I'm just giving game. Move my family on the island, I'm on some different things. 40 with the dick, call that bitch transgender. Next tattoo on my back gon' say cash getter. You trash nigga, yeah, you in the past nigga. I'ma help your pussy ass and wrap you in this bag nigga. Shit is easy, heard the tough talk, where you at? I'm about to go, T-Tucker boy, get the game. Matter of fact, Christmas presents, hey, this shit's a rap. Small gun, big clip, mixing.
Got the tree up by Molly Vinyl, spinning like the cosmos, born of the cosmos. I'ma do what I do, cranberry liquor. I ain't got no makeup on, cause I be chillin'. Baby, I know what you want. Time for, baby, making time for who you know it's time for.
Radio. UWR Priority Artists.
Underworld. Let go. Spit the flow. Rip the show. I ain't knocking, I'm busting out the door. Stay shining 7 days, 24. Know what's my name? L.O. Throw your fist up in the air like this here with it. Throw your fist up in the air like this here. Like this here. Throw your fist up in the air like this here with it. Up in the air like this here, like this straight up in your head like the white cook with soda. Tweaking for these hits cause the game been sober. Bass with the pipe organ got him on the relapse. Shouted getting booked, got her hands on the kneecaps. Country rap tunes with the country ass grammar. Ask me where I'm from, motherfucker this Bama. Southeastern Conference on lock, boy we lethal. Highland Road Tide and Wood Damn Eagle. You dig? Let go. Spit the flow, rip the show. I'm busting out the door. Stay shining 7 days, 24. Know what's my name? L.O. Throw your fist up in the air like this here with it. Throw your fist up in the air like this here, like this here. Throw your fist up in the air like this here with it. Throw your fist up in the air like this here, like this here. Keep it 100, I ain't studying who is gonna offend. Live by the motto, stand out, never blended in. Been about the cause, no justice, no peace. And I'ma say it clear, fuck the crooked police. Cause you ain't gonna be killing up by chilling like it's well. We gon' send them same slugs and you straight to hell. The same thing applies to my so-called brothers. Stop putting down and let's build up each other. And ain't nobody begging for no crumbs from the White House. Real change starts within you, not the White House. Man, I'm trying to learn my fuck to be self-sufficient. Elevate the trap, boy.
boy. Flip it to a business. You dig it? Let go. Spit the flow. Rip the show. I ain't knocking. I'm busting out the door. Stay shining 7 days, 24. Know what's my name? L.O. Throw your fist up in the air like this here with it. Throw your fist up in the air like this here. Like this here. Throw your fist up in the air like this here with it. Throw your fist up in the air like this here. Like this here. This was strictly for the players and hustlers. Riding I-20 with the serve for the customers. Pushing something foreign or you either Cadillac it. Gotta get it right for the Magic City Classic. And can't forget my queens, you hoes and the strippers. Shake that ass, make it pop on my zipper. I might just tip you, now drop it down low. Bust it wide open, then split like a pro. For sure, let go. Spit the flow, rip the show. I ain't knocking, I'm busting out the door. Stay shining 7 days, 24. Know what's my name? L.O. Throw your fist up in the air like this here with it. Throw your fist up in the air like this here. Like this here. Throw your fist up in the air like this here with it. Throw your fist up in the air like this here. Like this here. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah. Elbow. We stay shining 7 days, 24.
Real motherfucker understand they hate every goddamn thing about you. These motherfuckers hate real motherfuckers.
Now the Luke, Uncle Paul, Lefty De Niro, Caseman.
It's nothing, nigga. Nothing. This shit here, nigga. Nothing.
From my pimp cup, going money in a strip club. I drink from my pimp cup, going money in a strip club. I drink from my pimp cup, going money in a strip club. I drink from my pimp cup, going money in a strip club. With cheese, yo, whip up, throwing money in a strip club. I hop, we hit 2 in the morning for breakfast. Fucking Puerto Rico, mommy till she breathless. My dick game is epic. Gave her asthma attack, had to call the paramedic. Hit it, assess it. Pistol face, bumping uglies to that R. Kelly. 12 play, press play. I'm naughty by nature. Wrap it up with a magnum. That be my savior. She's Christ, her body was nice. Dunkin' Hines, she thick in all the right places. She kept on the skirt and her and from my pimp cup. Throwing money in the strip club. I drink from my pimp cup. Throwing money in the strip club. I drink from my pimp cup. Throwing money in the strip club. I drink from my pimp cup. Throwing money in the strip club. I drink from my pimp cup. Throwing money in the strip club. I drink from my pimp cup. Throwing money in the strip club. I drink from my pimp cup. Throwing money in the strip club. I drink from my pimp cup. Throwing money in the strip club.
Smoking weed.
This shit here, nigga. This shit here, nigga.
Drinks on the head. I'm watching the show as she melted. I mean, what do you say? On the pole, she's holding on. She throw it back and she show us on. So we stepping up and throw the money on. Long gone, tell me VIP. Had my bro up and message me. I'm telling her like, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna move. Make it jump for me. Make it clap on the world at speed. Let's get it jumping for a cannon. Look at how we scrambling. Money start to rambling. It's in the air, man, it's in the air. It's everywhere, man, it's everywhere. That's the ride for the bread. I toss it up over my head.
It's nothing, nigga. Nothing. It's nothing. This shit here, nigga. This shit here, nigga. It's nothing, nigga. It's nothing. It's nothing.
From my pimp cup, throwing money in a strip club. I drink from my pimp cup, throwing money in a strip club. I drink from my pimp cup, throwing money in a strip club. I drink from my pimp cup, throwing money in a strip club. I drink from my pimp cup, throwing money in a strip club. I drink from my pimp cup, throwing money in a strip club. I drink from my pimp cup, throwing money in a strip club. I drink from my pimp cup, throwing money in a strip club. I drink from my pimp cup.
Respect
To all my hustlers and hustlettes, you should never settle for less. Let's get this grand, guapa, never let no nigga stop you. Drop it like a bad bitch with a bad She got me turned on. She got that power, yo. My team will make it shower like the flowers. Old styles left in the narrow stereo. So what's the scenario? Yo, this trend is catchy like Venerio. Yo, this beat is buried though. Underworld, it smells the loot. Law life, official flow. Go get his better, get this dough. This bread is on the floor.
It's nothing, nigga. It's nothing. It's nothing, nigga. This shit here, nigga. This shit here, nigga. It's nothing, nigga. It's nothing. It's nothing, nigga.
From my pimp cup, throwing money in the strip club. I drink from my pimp cup, throwing money in the strip club. I drink from my pimp cup, throwing money in the strip club. I drink from my pimp cup, throwing money in the strip club. I drink from my pimp cup.
What's up, Queen B? How you been? Much love.
Oh, Styles, yeah, special up to you too. Queen Bean, and I mean that. Call you a king bean for whatever struggle you have been through. You a king for that. You made it. You made it to tell your story, to pass that message, and I'm proud of you. Thank you. It's true. Okay, believe that. It's true. It's not a game. It's not a game. When you do all your bullshit, keep your ass at home like me. So when you get fucked up, you fall asleep in your bed and wake up like a nigga.
You be tripping.
Your ass better be home. So you heard what I said. You heard what I said. Everybody play. You better be at home. So peace out.
Shouts to my girl Queen B for tuning into the show. Much love to you, Underworld Radio, with your boy Sticky O Styles. Beats by my homie Meta. Request lines is definitely open, y'all. Let's go. That's what it is, y'all. We're gonna take the show out like that. Much love to everybody that tuned in on every site that you tuned in on. We trying to get it real sexy up in here right now because we're going to go real political in a minute. So make sure y'all like and share the show, subscribe to the show, follow me. UTV Station everywhere. You could Google us and it's going to pop up UTV Station. So it's your boy Stiggity O Styles, Underworld Radio. The Mark of the Beast is coming, man. And for all y'all out there, you know, I've been trying to tell y'all what we trying to do. Mark of the Beast. Mark of the Beast is really going to be the streets point of view on how we feel about what's going on right now. And it's everything. It's not just police violence, but it's just violence, period. Violence in the streets, race violence, gang violence, police brutality, all of these things all mixed up into one, and that's what the Mark of the Beast is going to be on. We're going to promote it on 10 sites like we're doing right now. This is basically me testing out how we're going to do everything. But right now, we broadcasting on 10 different sites. 10 different sites is watching me talk to y'all right now. You feel me? And like I said, I got sites all around where, you know, a lot of people's not fucking with, but I'm promoting the new age of hip-hop and R&B, and we about to bring these politics in. So follow UTV Station, follow Old Styles JFK, man. This is what I do. I'm about to bring it to y'all. Anybody that's got footage or music, want to get submissions on the show, you could definitely hit me on my email, o.styles@yahoo.com, o.styles@yahoo.com. You also can go to our CD store. We got digital mix CDs that we put out. A few of them every month. We drop digital mix CDs. Undergroundentertainment.bandcamp.com. Undergroundentertainment.bandcamp.com. Definitely link up with us like that. We just got a lot of stuff in the mix, man. If y'all need videos shot, if y'all need promos done, if y'all need somebody to come to your party and, you know, get your party popping, and, you know, it's just so much stuff that we do. Y'all just need to link up with us, man. So anybody that's doing this shit, you can even have your own business. I shoot commercials, you know what I'm saying? Shout out to my people's Kayani Fells, much love to her. She definitely been holding me down with this promotion. A lot of stuff I couldn't do without her, as well as my technician Crisis. Shout out to Kate Smash, Kadish the artist, Commotion, and the whole Fresh Flow ENT. URF, shout outs to Danger, Ron Morris. Like I said, man, I got to get everybody to come through and fuck with me on this shit, man, because in reality, it should be a lot more in here, a lot more artists, a lot more people, basically fucking with this movement. And like I said, when I do this Market of Beast, they gonna ban that shit. You feel me? So I'm really testing a lot of things out right now, and the stuff they, fucking with my shows for, it's not really, it's nothing right now. So when I start doing what I'm doing, like I said, man, I'm able to walk down the street and stream to 10 different sites right now, like real rap right now. And that's how we gonna keep it going. I'm gonna try to get to 20 different sites, you know what I'm saying? But I'm gonna be able to broadcast this shit like a spider, where the shit could get lost in the sauce, you know what I'm saying? So if y'all got footage or some real shit going on in your hood, I don't care what hood you in, you know what I'm saying, send it to us, old.styles@yahoo.com. You got that fire and they not playing your shit on your local station, or you got a hot video, they don't got no place to play your video at, this where you come to, man. Underworld, man, we in the building for y'all, and we gonna promote it. We got people right now watching on Periscope. We got people right now watching the same shit on YouTube, you feel me? And that's just how we doing it. So we just gonna keep promoting. If you want to get down and join the movement, definitely link up with me, man. Hit me on Facebook, Keith Underworld Phillips. You can hit me on Instagram at Old Styles JFK. You can hit me on Twitter, Old Styles, YouTube, Underworld Television, UTV Station, and Underground Entertainment. That's my YouTube pages. I got 3 of them. You know what I'm saying? But just follow us, man. You could Google us and find us and just link up. Damn, I'm breaking my shit, but we gonna do it like that, yo. I'm out, man. It's the new age of hip hop and R&B with your boy Old Stiggity, Old Styles.